Recollections by Iain B. It was JC who introduced me to a new way of listening, and listening very carefully to classical music. It was the Musical Appreciation Society, I think it was called that assembled in JC's quarters in Claremont each Wednesday, which was culture night. I knew him as the principal, and he was sponsoring the Musical Appreciation Society. In the Musical Society, we got to listen to classical music on JC's Quad brand hi-fi gear, preamp, amplifier, and electrostatic speakers. I'd never seen this equipment before, but I later discovered it was absolute top of the range. Quad stands for Quality Unit Amplifier Domestic, made by the Acoustic Manufacturing Company of UK. I knew him as the boss, or JC. My memories of the place are those of a child who came from a grammar school in North Wales, where I had been the only English child in the school. I was used to being picked on by bullies, because I was different. I sounded and behaved differently to the other children, many of whom spoke Welsh at home. I had been taught by my older brothers to never back down if a fight was threatened, because I would regret it. And so I used to face up to a potential threat and go in with fists flying to do max damage, even if I wasn't likely to fare well, on the basis that the bully would not usually come back for more, preferring to pick on an easier victim next time. So I had learned to be quite aggressive when I came to Aiglon. My initial response to arriving at Aiglon was, "What a bunch of softies." Took me a while, but fortunately my mother taught me to be somewhat thoughtful. And so I eventually started to see that the boys were working in a closed system, a community, and that it worked better if we all cooperated and pulled together in the community. Once that penny dropped, I started moving up the ranks. Standard bearer candidate, standard bearer, then counselor, then house prefect, then vice house captain. I didn't seek these things. I just became more responsible without realizing it. I never sucked up to anybody or had any ambitions to be one of those things. I think it was quite a good system, the school ranking system. Now, my first council meeting. Like all systems in a community, there was corruption. I saw this when I was invited to become a counselor. The day I was elected, I was invited to sit in on the last part of the council meeting that had elected me. They were discussing some of the boys and whether they should be promoted. There was one boy, Brian Diaz, who was up for the standard bearer candidate, and a doubt was raised. It is still not certain whether he is smoking. And the counselors agreed that there couldn't be a promotion if there was a suspicion of smoking, which offense was punishable by expulsion. I was puzzled by this, as I knew which of the boys on the council were themselves smokers. I asked, "Is the only reason for his not being promoted the suspicion that he might be a smoker?" They agreed that this was the case. So I said, "People who are in this room could also be supposed to be smokers, isn't that so?" There were students and teachers there. There was a deathly silence in the room. I just thought that they were a bunch of bloody hypocrites, and this was my first meeting. I went at it fairly logically like that, and said something like, I would hate to be the one to suppose which of the boys in the meeting might be smokers. The upshot was that Brian got a well-earned promotion, which he had very much wanted. It would have been very demotivating not to have promoted him. Unfortunately, I had by then developed the tendency to stand up for the underdog, for those who are not present or able to defend themselves, and I hated hypocrisy.